Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting session of the Global Fleet Virtual Conference 2020, a highlight session, as we have invited 4 top executives of today's main international leasing companies to share how global car leasing can flourish in the new normal. Indeed, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce to you today Mr. Tim Albertsen, CEO of ALD and representing the ALD Wheels Alliance, Mr. Tex Gunning, CEO of LeasePlan, Bart Bekkers, CCO of Arval and representing the Arval Element Global Alliance, and finally Reggie Cabal, CEO of Oryx Australia and New Zealand and partner of the Global Fleet Services Network. Gentlemen, welcome to the Global Fleet Virtual Conference, and I hope that you are all doing fine, and thank you for making time in your busy calendar. We of course know that for many years global fleet management and leasing have been thriving. But the current pandemic has of course also caused a rift in the growth curve. In this panel discussion, we are going to examine how you prepare for the new normal, with what impact for your business, and of course that of your international customers. Gentlemen, for the first round, we would like to keep it simple. I will give you 1 minute, not more, to detail your company and your business. So if you can highlight a little bit what your business is about and what your company is about, that would be perfect. 1 minute for each of you, and we will start with Reggie. Reggie, you are based in Australia, so it's quite late. I hope that you are doing well. Can you tell us a little bit more what Oryx is about?
Thank you, Stephen. Oryx Australia and New Zealand is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Oryx Group, and Oryx Group is a diversified financial services company organization that's based out of Tokyo, Japan. It was founded in 1964, and we operate in about 37 different countries. Depending on the country that we operate in, our portfolio may vary, but in Asia Pacific, fleet management is one of our core business, and we manage about 1.8 million vehicles in the region.
Okay, thank you very much, and great having you in this panel. Next up is Tex Gunning, CEO of LeasePlan. Tex, you are based in Amsterdam. Can you tell us, and for those that might not know yet, LeasePlan, what LeasePlan is all about?
Yeah, so thank you for having us today. Now, LeasePlan is a privately held company. It was started around 55 years by a few entrepreneurs. I think that whole founding mentality you'll still find in LeasePlan. It's a group of entrepreneurs that all the time is busy to think what's next. That's why we also have the tagline, what's next. We're operating in around 31, 32 countries around the world. We have around 2 million cars on the road. I think we're very optimistic about the future. So we don't think there is going to be another normal. The normal is going to be the same for us. And we're looking forward to the future. Okay, we are looking forward together with you. Thank you very much, Tex. Up next is Bart Bekkers. Bart, you represent Arval Element. You are based in Paris. Can you tell us a little bit more about Arval?
Yes, of course, with pleasure. So Arval is in fact a full subsidiary of BNP Paribas Bank, present in 30 countries today, and indeed one of the 2 founding members of the Element Arval Global Alliance, which has in fact a very special year this year because it's a celebration of our 25th year of anniversary. We are a full service lease company managing or funding and managing quite a few vehicles as well, more than 1.3 million, long-term rental, mid-term rental, short-term rental, car sharing. That's the sort of activities we are in. And as you may have seen recently, we announced a new tagline also for the many journeys in life, which is in fact a first indication that we want to go also beyond the vehicle.
Okay. Thank you, Bart. Thank you for joining. And then the 4th CEO in this executive panel is Tim Albertsen of ALD, representing ALD Wheels. Tim, what is ALD about?
Well, first of all, thanks for being here. Well, ALD is, like the others, about leasing and fleet management of vehicles for the time being. We are a listed company in Paris, but our majority shareholder is Société Générale, 80%. And basically, we're running 1.8 million cars across 43 countries today with a direct presence, but present in 55 countries with our partners, Wheels, MAL, and a few other partners we have across the globe. And I guess have been growing very fast in the last years. We are, as LeasePlan and Tex, quite optimistic about the future. We don't see that this will change the dynamics of this industry. It will have a hiccup, but the dynamics will be remaining. And we also think, like Arval, that there is something behind the vehicle or after the vehicle as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's start with the first topic. That topic needs to be, how are we going to continue with global car leasing in the new normal? It's already good that some of you are very optimistic. That is what we like, and that is also, I imagine, what your customers like to hear. But we would like to see more specifically, how do you see the evolution into the new normal and what could change? And I would like to start with you, Tim. Tim, what are the main consequences of the pandemic for the global leasing industry? And more importantly, how do you see the industry and your business recover after probably a few challenging months that you have had?
Well, I guess it's very clear that our industry, like any other industry, has been impacted by the pandemic and the close down and lockdowns, the deconfinement and confinement of people in different countries. I mean, the IMF is estimating a contraction of GDP of up to 7-8% in Europe this year. So clearly that has an impact also on our business. However, we see basically the industry is a bit put into three different categories. First category is the ones, let's say, in the tourist industry who are basically seeing their business disappearing overnight. So hotels closing down, airlines seeing their business disappearing. And then you have actually the companies who have been seeing growth in times of let's say, the pandemic, where you have seen some of the pharmaceuticals having a lot of new business to see, and clearly the digital retailers have seen a revival. I think the industry business and our business, the leasing business, is in between, because we are basically having a big stock of contracts. So our business does not stop overnight. And it gives a lot of resilience to a situation like this, basically that we will see that the business is continuing. And I guess that translates into two major challenges for companies like ours. It's about selling the used cars, where we take the risk on the residuals, which is to be dealt with. And it's, of course, a matter of cost of risk to a large extent. And dealing with those two, let's say, challenges that I think we learned in the crisis 2008 and 2009, where we saw a similar situation where the used car markets basically stops, and where, of course, cost of risk also took a hike at that point. I think we are much better prepared this time, because we basically have learned a lot from the last round. We were very early out, and I guess it goes for the full industry to extend contracts. Mm-hmm. It's in the interest of our customers, because they don't have a lot of visibility, like we don't have a lot of visibility on the future right now. We think it will be after summer, we'll see much more where we are with that. But the contract extension allows us not to get the cars back to our used car stock, and therefore not put used cars into a market that is a bit sluggish. Mm-hmm. And in terms of cost of risk, of course, we have learned the lessons as well. And I guess overall, for all the four on the table today, is that the quality of our clients is very good, and strong companies, strong consumers that actually will come through this crisis as well.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I would like to have a reaction of Tex. Tex, I would like to see with you, how long can you, and do you think that leasing companies are going to continue to suggest extending existing contracts to your customers?
We have to realize that extensions are driven by a few events, right? There's not a lot of supply of cars. There's a lot of noise that cars are going to be delivered, but when we start ordering them, we see that the delivery times are just going up and up and up. So there's a lot of uncertainty which cars can be delivered when. And that also drives the extension. So it's not only that, of course, in economic crisis, everybody sits on his hands and you do liquidity planning and cash is king. Our customers do that, we do that, dealers do that. But it's also the cars are just not there. So we're looking at very long supply chains at the moment. Some of these parts companies are going bankrupt and have to reinvent themselves. And we have to see when these cars come available again. But what I again would like to reemphasize with Tim is our industry is a recurring income industry. And we're service industries. Those cars don't disappear. They're still there, still the owners, the drivers there. And that's what makes this industry such an attractive industry and such a solid industry.
Okay. Would like to go to Bart. Bart, Tim was comparing at one moment in his answer the current situation with the financial crisis of 2008. Is it comparable for you and your business, or is there somehow a difference in coming out of the crisis?
I fully agree with Tim that it's very comparable and that there's many lessons that we have learned back then that we can now apply. Yeah? And specifically this audience that will be following this conversation knows very well that contract extensions was the right answer also back then. So it has an interest immediately for the client. The TCO can be brought better under control, some certainty. As Tex is saying, with the uncertainty about delivery times, it solves that problem on top. We didn't have maybe that problem so many years ago, but there's many similarities indeed. Maybe making the link also to cost of risk. So even if most of our companies are working with solid clients and creditworthiness, of course, is key in this sort of business, we have seen that we had to help some of our clients, whether that was either directly through the bank, BNP Paribas or SocGen. I mean, the banks have had to play a very important role in the last few weeks and months. And so leasing companies like ourselves have had to play this role as well to a certain degree. So clients that were all of a sudden confronted with no longer being able to pay from one day to the other, you want to find solutions for that, because these clients, they have supported you in good times, and then it's also important to support them in more challenging times. Not all of our clients have asked us to help them financially speaking in terms of bridging this gap, but some have, and yeah, that has been different compared to the last crisis. But many similarities. Coming back, if I may, on the remarketing environment, it is fair to say that, of course, there is an interest for full-service leasing companies like ourselves as well with contract extensions, because the sort of quality vehicles that our clients typically look for in a 3, 4, 5 year environment, well-maintained vehicles that they like to buy, there are clients behind this that need them. And if the demand level of those clients behind our B2B buyers or directly in the retail environment goes down, then you're better off indeed limiting your offer level through contract extension. So in this respect, I think it's a win-win for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Reggie, COVID-19 and the pandemic is, of course, a global crisis. Now, we know that if we look at the global fleet market landscape, that, of course, it could be even more challenging for less mature fleet markets, because perhaps they are not so well adapted to solutions that could be, let's say, helpful to overcome the challenges and get back into the new normal. What I would like to see with you is, could the return to the new normal in less mature fleet markets like APEC, LATAM, come with accelerated trends that may move too fast for those markets? Perhaps that mobility, digitization, there are perhaps other things that will be accelerated by the pandemic and coming out of it, where some of the markets are not ready for. What is your opinion about that?
Well, we're looking at it from a perspective of pre-vaccine and post-vaccine. I mean, with the behaviors, there are going to be some behaviors that are going to be predetermined in terms of pre-vaccine and post-vaccine. I can only comment in terms of APEC, certainly not LATAM. and certainly within Asia Pacific, as most of you know, it's not monolithic. There are different countries with varying levels of maturity, capability, and abilities in terms of products and services, depending on the country that you operate in. So what we're seeing, for example, in Australia and New Zealand, what Tim had mentioned, there are some industries that are continuing to operate as business as usual. So it's stable, it's growing, as opposed to other industries where there's been disruption, and there's certainly some industries where it was already being disrupted before COVID-19. Media is a great example of that. I think with COVID-19 in some of those industries, it's accelerated the disruption. And so in terms of those areas, it's manifesting itself in terms of, well, what do we really need moving forward? And I think those are the kind of questions that needs to be answered in terms of being able to provide a solution. And this is where the flexibility comes into play, whether it's flexibility around different types of mobility, and you can define what mobility is for each country. It could be as easy as riding a tricycle, for example, and that gets somebody from point A to point B. Again, it's a matter of maturity and capability in the markets that you serve. But flexibility comes a lot because of the disruption that's happening, and flexibility can come in different flavors.
Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, every crisis should lead to innovation, new thoughts, and disruption. A crisis can help companies rethink their business model, and it can also provide them with an obligation or even an opportunity to accelerate new business initiatives. Also for the vehicle leasing industry. Bart, you to start. And I would like to start with the utilization question. It's an important one. According to the results of our COVID-19 survey that we organized end of April, more than 1/3 of the corporate fleet managers that responded expect their fleet to shrink in the future. How will this steer your business model? How can you adapt to that if indeed fleets do decide to decrease their fleet?
I think that's part of the game, Stephen, and it might be indeed a bit more abrupt in the months to come than it would normally be in business as usual. So COVID has certainly created some shocks. Now, I'm not so pessimistic in that respect, and I think that Tim and Tex pointed that out already. You know that we do our annual barometer as well, and we did it, in fact, we finalized it just before COVID-19 hit us, but we did a follow-up on that with respect to the clients that were interviewed, and many of them were saying, of course, short term, we might have to review the levels of our fleet. By the way, contract extensions is one of those reasons also to not have to take too big decisions, giving yourself a bit more time to take those decisions. But many of them were even talking about continuing on energy transition, investing more and what have you. So I'm not that pessimistic. Now, I'll try to answer your question, because your question is what happens and how do you adapt if it does happen, but I'm not so pessimistic on the question itself. Of course, companies like ourselves have not been waiting for COVID-19 to arrive to diversify our business model, thinking of solutions like midterm rental, the flexibility that we have just been talking about already. Subscription models, I think, is a variation on that same theme. But also alternative mobility is part of the game, and not because COVID-19 just hit us. I'll give you one example. In our country, where we both live, I think that e-bikes have never been that popular as the last few months. Now, e-bikes were already around last year, the year before. We see them appearing in Paris. I happen to live in the city center of Paris. Mrs. Hidalgo has paved the way already, without knowing it, for the COVID-19 crisis to take over on e-bikes in the city center of Paris. So we can just as well fund those bikes. We can service those bikes. We can insure those bikes. They happen to be valuable assets as well, as opposed to the older models that we sometimes knew, and that's what a company like ourselves, and I'm sure that my colleagues will share that view. has to innovate in and invest in upfront ahead of this sort of crisis to happen. But again, our interviewees in the barometer suggest that they continue to grow in the future, and having done the follow through, yes, there will be short term some hesitation. Yes, flexibility will be important. Yes, we'll have to accompany them, but I'm not very much afraid that the company car, or the private lease car, by the way, will continue to grow.
Okay. A question, of course, that also fleet managers have, Tim, is they will focus much more on TCO, on cost. Will this also be the case with their business partners? So are you going to stick to the commitments you have made regarding investments in new technology, electrification, and new mobility solutions? Or can we expect that there is perhaps a calm down in the leasing industry?
Yeah, maybe before I answer that question, maybe a quick input to what Bart just said. I think in terms also of our industry, I think there is, I think this crisis basically will push some of the mega trends that we have seen in the past, and really there has been a shift from ownership to usership that we have seen. We know that there is an underlying growth in our market basically that has been very strong the last years, going from either an outright purchase, finance lease, other finance methods, to operating lease or to our core product, because people actually want to outsource the risk and all the administration of this. And it's not just for big corporates. In 2008, 2009, we saw the SMEs coming into our business model, and now we see the consumers coming in as well. And I think this actually shows, first of all, it shows our existing clients that having a professional partner like one of us allows them to actually maneuver much better in a situation like this, which again will allow us to keep growing. So I don't think we will have to face the fact that we will be defleeting a whole lot actually in this industry. I think there will be still growth to come in this industry. I'm pretty sure about that. Clearly there will be some bumps along the way, but overall there's still a very good trend on the growth side, I think. And the worst thing you could do in a situation like this, it's also true that all the digital models actually throughout the crisis here and the lockdowns, the confinement, our digital platforms has performed. We've been selling cars, we've been selling contracts, we've been actually putting cars with new partners on the road, whereas basically our physical outlets have been stalled because people could not come and buy a car physically in the last 2-3 months. So the worst thing you could do was to start scaling down on your development in the digital area. In the electrification, I think like Bart said, our customers, we also have had very strong or very close contact with most of our clients throughout the crisis here. And the feedback is they want to continue the electrification of their fleets. They want to move basically the needle on the CSR and let's say, the CO2 footprint and all that. So overall, in our way of looking at the world, the best we can do now is to continue investing and even opt a few of these programs out. We might have to be a bit more specific on which programs we push more than others, but we don't see a specific decrease on our investing into new technology, into new platforms, to the transformation to electrics.
Okay, very good. Continuing, of course, on fleet electrification, Tex Gunning, you and LeasePlan are advocating the urgent adoption of EVs. How realistic is this approach in, let's say, an environment with plenty of markets perhaps not yet ready for full electric adoption, but also with oil prices that are quite attractive, low, and with corporates asking their fleet managers to put cost first? Can you really commit to that fleet electrification message?
Yeah, I think, as Tim also started to allude to, there's a lot of things coming together at the moment. And I think the pandemic crisis is playing here a major role as well. So for one, EVs is going to happen, also driven by legislation and the Brussels CO2 penalties. So that's one reason. But you also have seen that the COVID crisis has made very clear the interdependency of this world. And people, I'm pretty sure the climate change agenda will get far more attention particularly if Mr. Trump loses, if Mr. Biden wins, you will see there an acceleration in the climate change agenda that will drive EVs as well. So for us as an industry, and I'm just saying what other people have said as well, we believe that the growth will be massively there, partly driven by the mega trend indeed from ownership to usership to subscription models, but also because of electrification. I think not many consumers and SME customers want to take the risk on an electrical vehicle, whether there's technological obsolescence. No, and that is our core competence, that we can take risk with a portfolio approach. So you will see that EV will drive it, will also drive the ownership, the lease market very, very fast. And I think we're all properly ready for that, I think. A lot of models will come out over the next 24 months. That will drive it as well. So there will be a lot of excitement. There will be quite a lot of cool cars coming out. There will be a lot of excitement. The infrastructure will follow. I have no doubt about it. The mayors of major cities will drive this very, very hard. They just want to get rid of their diesels and petrol cars in the inner cities. So there are too many things all pointing in the same direction. Electrification, acceleration of electrification, and it's going to happen.
Okay, thank you. Reggie, we know, of course, that in China, fleet electrification is already since years on the agenda steered by the government. Are also the other, let's say, APEC countries ready for a greener fleet and fleet electrification when we are in the new normal?
There's definitely a two-speed process on the adoption. China's been very good about the electrification, the investment in the infrastructure and in the adoption of electric vehicles, whether it's local manufacturing or foreign. I can't say the same for the rest of Asia Pacific. I mean, there are outposts where there's been, I suppose, a government mandate in terms of adoption. New Zealand is a great example of that. It plays up to their green credentials as a country. In Australia, it's uneven. However, with the recovery out of this crisis, it actually potentially there's an acceleration of the investment in infrastructure, for charging stations, which is a good thing. And the other bit, frankly, is the government subsidies in terms of adoption of electric vehicle. That's worked out really well in China, as you know, and some other countries where they've had that. But it always falls back into the infrastructure, and I don't think that's certainly the case in Asia Pacific. Some countries are more advanced than others.
Okay, we'd like to continue with the flexibility question for Tim. Tim, do you think, as Bart also already mentioned, that this could be a period in which fleet management evolves from perhaps a long-term commitment setup to a more flexible product and service offering, and that your customers are looking for shorter-term and more flexible solutions?
Yeah, I think it will be both, I guess. I think the flex will be basically a complement to what we're doing, and it looks to become a significant part of what we could do with our clients and for our clients. What has been interesting, again, through this crisis, where we have been talking to our customers, is the feedback is basically that they have people who have potentially opted out of their company car schemes in the past. And now they do not necessarily want to get into a public transportation, a bus, a metro, or whatever. And they might want to get back into a corporate car scheme, but they do not want to sign up for a 3 or 4 year contract. And here the Flex product is perfect because you can get a car from 1 month and onwards. And that helps basically to do, let's say, a transformation for that. We have been doing Flex actually in ALD Spain. We have had a Flex company for the last 3.5 years. And what we have seen in that is that it's mainly new clients that we are getting with that product. We are serving some of our existing clients with that product as well, but mainly new clients. So for us, it's actually acquisition of new segments to a large extent. But it's very clear that whether you are corporate or you are consumer today, you're looking for more flexibility than you were in the past. So I think it's going to be a nice complement. I don't think it's cannibalization big time. I think it's a complement more than that, that's for sure.
Okay. Reggie, the goal of a fleet management company is to serve its customers, for example, via, if we talk about global fleet management, via standardization, harmonization and processes and so on. How do you do this in a field as complex as mobility? We expect that perhaps over time mobility will increase, the appetite for mobility. How can you there harmonize, standardize the things that your global fleet customers would like you to standardize and harmonize?
It'd be great if we can do that in Asia Pacific. The reality is, in terms of what's happening underground, it's a little bit different, actually a lot different. Again, it falls back into just the maturity and capability in each country in terms of what's available. There's an element of it, especially with global tenders that you're seeing. There's an education component that has to come into play when they try and harmonize. They're trying to have a harmonized solution in Asia Pacific. It always falls back into an education piece in terms of what's possible. There are some things that you can introduce into new markets. But it comes with a lot of risk in terms of continuity and stability. So the education piece is quite important. Now, having said that, you always keep trying. You don't stop. So you always try and find some common ground in terms of ease of adoption of certain things. Technology is good at leveling that field, and so. We've talked about in terms of investments in technology, that continues to be a high priority for us because it does allow a level playing field and it accelerates adoption of products and services across different markets that have different maturity levels.
Okay. Tex, we are with the crisis, of course, also seeing that there is perhaps more skepticism around the use of public transport, shared mobility. How do you see the growth and the appetite for new mobility next to car-centric mobility evolve within global fleets?
I think our view is that everybody loves cars, right? So we can talk about mobility, whether people take their step or their tricycle, as was mentioned. But people love cars and they want cars. And whatever transport they take during the week, or they still need a car in the weekend. So we continue to say people love cars and cars will here to stay. We think fleets will only grow. And yes, with certain corporate customers, you have flexible fleets around a base fleet. But it doesn't diminish or decrease the fleets. It doesn't decrease the number of cars. It doesn't decrease the number of kilometers. We don't believe that at all. We have seen over the years that number of cars grow, number of kilometers grow, and we believe that the number of cars and kilometers in lease cars will only grow very, very rapidly over the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that these CEOs, I know that from previous panel discussions that we had, that they all like to be the biggest. But we are not going to have that discussion because, gentlemen, you are all very big. But there are some interesting, let's say, variations in your strategy and the way you act across the globe. And that I would like to discuss. And I would like to start with Tex. Tex, you are present today in more than 30 countries, 31 or 32 countries, as LeasePlan. Why aren't you operating in a partnership or alliance constellation to increase your global footprint and make it easier perhaps for your global customers, as the others are doing?
Yeah, so let's first recognize, of course, that we're in most of America. We're in North America, we're in Brazil, we're in Mexico, we're in India, we're in Australia, New Zealand. So we're not just focusing on the Netherlands here, and we're in most of the European countries. Yeah, there are people who run to different countries to find growth. I don't like that strategy. I think it's a highly risk strategy. Many people were the first to run into China, and all of them have been burnt. I lived on that side of the world for, I think, 15 years. I've been running companies in China. I've been running companies in India. I think we have enough to do here in Europe. We have enough to do in North America, South America. Let's focus on that. As we said, we expect massive market growth. And let's capture that market growth. And then I'm more than happy for other people to develop the Asian market. More than happy.
So, but it's not really the strategy of LeasePlan, and it will not be that you are looking for alliance partners to see where you can even, let's say, increase your global footprint.
Well, I think we do have a lot of partnerships. People don't know that, most of that, because it's not so visible, but we do have partnerships. And of course, we're always open for partnerships, but it has to be absolutely relevant. Business strategy, what they say, okay, let's expand. Many people have lost massive amounts of money with just let's expand. So if you want to enter a certain market, and you can't do it on your own, yes, of course, you do it with a partner. If you want to enter a certain segment or distribution channel of the market and you can't do it on your own, you do it with a partner. None of us is as strong as all of us. But at the moment, we still grow. We still have enough to go for. And indeed, if partners knock on our door, yes, of course, we'll see whether it brings a mutual benefit to both of us.
Okay, thank you. Bart, a reaction from you first, because you were saying in the announcement when you were presenting Arval that you are in a global alliance with Element and that this year it's the 25th anniversary. So it seems successful to partner with another business partner. Is it really, let's say, a well-developed strategy that you would like to continue in the future?
Well, let me start by going back indeed 25 years for 1 second. We started this partnership with Element. By the way, the name was different at the time, but we started that because there were two market-leading companies trying to find a way to bridge significant gaps in business models between North America and Europe, or the other way around, if you want, in the interest of common clients. And that's how this started. And since then, we've been very happy, very satisfied, sometimes also very lucky when we had the opportunity to jointly acquire the GE portfolio. We were also quite lucky to be able to do that. But we have been able to capitalize on that. And it is, of course, it's sometimes a bit more challenging, but you do it in the interest of your clients, of course. You want to operate seamlessly. You want to make sure that your global clients can take the benefit of local market leaders also, not just because of the scale that they have. Look at Element in the US, for instance, but also for the service levels that your global clients expect. And rather than planting as many flags as possible, which is also certainly not the strategy of Arval, nor of Element, by the way, we have been quite lucky to be able to start 25 years ago together, and quite happy to see partners onboarding in areas where we couldn't afford to go locally ourselves because of lack of potential, if you want, and where we had the enormous luck to have good local opportunities with partners that are still on board today. So it's a bit of history, but it's mainly about working together in the interest of global clients to serve them as well as you can in specific local markets, still integrating at the highest possible level, of course, the relationship management, the data reporting, and things like that.
Okay. Tim, coming to you, are you planting flags all over the place too fast?
No, I would say definitely not. We have probably a completely contrary, let's say, opinion than Sexton and LeasePlan in terms of geographical expansion. I mean, you will never see ALD in the US, you will never see us in Japan, you will never see us in Australia, New Zealand. We don't go up to markets where we don't have anything to offer, to be very frank. because there's already a high competition. It's, in our view, low profitable markets. I mean, the returns from these markets, unless you are very big and very dominant, they are quite insignificant and basically below the average of our group every time we've been looking around. So I would say what we have been super successful with over the last 20 years is actually opening up a lot of immature market in Eastern Europe, in South America, and in India. Say the only country we have not succeeded is basically China. I agree with Tex, it's a very difficult country to run a business, but we actually went out of there with a check of 10 million euros, so it was not completely stupid at the end of the day. But it's true the Chinese market is very different from any other market, and the main difference is that you don't have company car fleets that is running in China, and therefore, I mean, there's no real, let's say, leverage on our business model in China. You know that we are starting up in Southeast Asia these days, and again, we find markets where we see a low level of maturity, where we can bring software, technology, customers into the market and believe that we can actually do some very nice returns from this market. And that's at least what our experience has been, is that it's very, very profitable markets when you get in and have a market leading position in Russia or India. You actually have nice returns from these markets. And of course, it's true that Asia in particular is more different than the rest. When we open up in South America, it's quite a European mindset that is in South America in terms of our business model, whereas in Asia it's a bit different. That's why you see us going with a partner, Mitsubishi, who will be our partner for opening up in several markets in Southeast Asia. So, I mean, that's basically on the business side. I think I fully agree with Bart. We are doing all this because we have customers who are asking for our services in these markets. And the fact that we are in 43 countries, we are the only big international company in a number of markets in Eastern Europe and in other places. And it actually means we're always on the tender list of these big corporate clients who are having a global tender. So it gives us also a foot in that respect. So, but of course, without our customers actually expressly saying that they want us to be in those markets to serve them, we wouldn't be there. I mean, that's very clear.
Okay, Reggie, just you know it probably, but so ALD is focusing on APEC. They left China last year and re-entered this year. LeasePlan had plans some years ago to create a hub in Malaysia. Never really came out like they hoped for. And Arval, let's say, stopped their own business in India a few months ago. Do you think that a not APEC business partner has really a chance of doing great business in APEC?
Well, first of all, I'll say competition is always welcomed. You know, the last thing you want as an organization is to be complacent in the markets that you operate in. You know, that leads to obsolescence really quickly. So competition is always welcome. But having said that, being an incumbent in the region does have some advantages, and we play to that because we do have a real understanding of the local markets that we operate in. And, you know, part of that is having scale in those markets that allows us to be able to have developed a reputation. So, I mean, those all add up, having incumbency in those areas. But as I said, competition is always welcomed. And I'll say this again, because I've said this a few times already. You know, there are varying levels of maturity within Asia Pacific in terms of capability around products and services. It's not monolithic, and so there's an education piece whenever you see global tenders about what's possible and what's not. And I've also said already about technology being a leveling, tool in terms of being able to kind of bring everybody up, and that still holds true. It's investment in technology that allows you, that transparency across the region. But yeah, no, I certainly welcome the entrance into the space. If nothing else, that keeps us on our toes.
Okay, thank you. Bart, you opened up shop in Colombia, but the LATAM continent is heavily impacted by some economic and financial challenges, volatility all around. What are your ambitions in LATAM? Do you want to have, let's say, a similar footprint as your colleagues in Paris or VLD?
Trying to follow Tim to plant as many flags as possible. No. That's not the idea. In fact, the Colombian adventure, the Colombian project was already decided some time ago when we jointly invested in Peru and Chile with Relsa. That was in fact the start of this discussion. Of course, as you say, the circumstances are a bit special at the moment, but we should also look a bit for the longer term. But this was for us a nice opportunity on top of the two other countries that we decided to invest in jointly with Relsa, who know the region very well. And if you remember, this is also, geographically speaking, a nice addition to the Americas map, where we have kind of agreed with Element also that they, of course, are in the North American part, plus Mexico. Mexico, which is somewhere in the middle between a North American business model and a more European business model, where Colombia typically would be one of those typical areas that you go after, and that's our ambition, to be concrete, to convert as many clients who are still in outright purchase today to move to leasing, and if at all possible, to a kind of leasing that we know how to manage. And that's the start of the Colombian project, if you want. Again, clients asking us to be there, global clients in the first place. And that's it. Okay. So yes, there are some challenges in Colombia, and not only in Colombia, I would say, but the opportunity is there. And if you look back already, we started in LATAM in Brazil originally, solid growth figures for many years. Chile, Peru is really growing well. So why wouldn't we be successful together with our clients in Colombia? But there are a couple of challenges indeed for tomorrow.
Tim, is there some good advice that you can give to Bart to be really successful in Colombia?
Well, they can copy a bit what we are doing, because we have actually been quite successful from the start, and we have been growing very well as well. So we are always happy to share best practices, even with competition, you know. So that's no, I mean, it's true that I think South America have shown very interesting potential for us. Again, they adapt basically the business model that we have. It's a lot of the similar, let's say, customers we have. We have actually sourced a lot of our customers out of our business in Spain, and of course with our partner in the US, Wheels. It's a great way of working, cross-working with customers. And I think, I mean, I think for South America, we are just at the very start of things. There's plenty of opportunities there. There's plenty more markets, actually. I think there is like 33 countries in South America, and we are in 6 countries. So there's plenty of opportunities to go for, and we see some very interesting opportunities. Maybe just to Reggie, in terms of competition in Southeast Asia, I mean, I think it's true that when you get into a quite immature market, it's good to be more than one, because we have to educate the market, and we know that when we are 2 or 3, the market is actually growing much faster than if we try to do it on our own, you know. So, and I'm sure that we come with our own clients, and you have your clients. So there's plenty of room for both parties, and for maybe a third one as well at some point.
Okay, Reggie, Oryx is of course the leasing partner for APEC. So how do you envision, if we look a little bit forward, the adoption of subscription-based mobility services and ride-hailing services for corporate fleets in APEC? Because sometimes we have the impression that perhaps those kind of services will emerge much faster than here in Europe or in Latin America or in the US. What is your perspective?
No, absolutely. I think it's the ability to be able to move products and services, and so, you know, at a lower transaction cost. So the ability to do ride hailing or ride sharing is key. One thing that Tex had mentioned that I wanted to add was that in Australia and New Zealand, social distancing protocols are applicable in public transport still. And nobody knows how long that's going to go for. So as a result of that, they're operating at sub-capacity in terms of just all the modes of transport in terms of the public space, which then means that the ability to be able to provide more vehicles out on the road becomes kind of paramount. And with ride hailing and the like type of subscription services, the thing that comes up is around hygiene of the vehicles after each use. So it's the ability to be able to deliver or guarantee the hygiene comes into mind. So that's kind of the big thing in terms of subscription or ride-hailing or ride-sharing services. Again, the perspective is pre-vaccine, post-vaccine. And given that we're still quite some distance off potentially when a vaccine might be available, is how can you actually guarantee the hygiene, or the delivery of hygiene services in order for those services to have a higher or an accelerated adoption rate. And so those are the things that we're looking at that would make that more attractive very quickly.
Okay. Gentlemen, it's our duty to end this panel discussion with promises and tips. It's a final round of questions. I would like to start with Tex Gunning of LeasePlan. Tex, how can you establish a long-term relationship in a period where many of your customers are forced to control costs and decrease also costs, and they are perhaps looking from one day to the other? What are the nicest opportunities to jump from a business partner to another?
Yeah, again, we are all in this industry already for more than 50, 60, 70 years. I mean, COVID is there, and COVID has an impact in the here and now, but COVID has no impact on the underlying quality of our business and not on the underlying quality of the relationship that we have with our customers. So what was is still here and will continue to be here also after COVID.
Okay. Bart, how do you see the creation of a long-term commitment in this perhaps more challenging time? Or do you fully agree with what Tex has said?
I to a very large extent agree with what Tex said. What I would just like to add is that this is exactly the time when you can capitalize on long-term relationships with your full-service lease company to make sure that you don't only tackle the short-term challenges of going through COVID and even post-COVID, but also prepare for the longer-term future. We talked about energy transition. These are serious investments. We can talk about flexibility. Again, you really need to have a strategic partnership relationship with your client and the other way around. And at the same time, it's up to us also to help our clients adapting ourselves completely in this very short-term challenge of sanitation services, making sure that they have the flexibility around their fleet and everything to do with it. So I would even say the answer is having a long-term relationship. It's not just about tactically changing or things like that. It's the opposite.
Okay. Coming then to the tips, starting with Reggie. Can you name one tip, Reggie, that a global fleet manager should know, needs to know, in order to secure a healthy global fleet management strategy?
Provide flexible solutions. And that's not just with solutions, meaning it could be as easy as something different. It could be term. It's basically a bag of tools that allow you to be able to provide flexible solutions to your client.
Okay. And Tim, what would be your main tip in terms of strategy development for global fleet managers that are listening and viewing now our discussion?
Well, I think it's first of all, I think it's very important for, let's say, for a global fleet manager to ensure that he has services, across a period, including a COVID crisis, and therefore making sure that he has a partner supplier who is having the capacity to go through and maintain, as Tex said, the services, the quality of the services that we are providing. I think that's very important. And I think you don't get that unless you get really into a very close dialogue. I mean, you need to make sure that because we also have to make our choices if in terms of crisis, who are we supporting and who are we not supporting. I mean, the people who are constantly looking for the lowest price, we would not necessarily put a lot of priority to. We would put priority to the customers where we constantly have a good dialogue. And as I think Reggie said, we need to innovate in that moment. Of course, make sure that we bring the right products to the customers in that moment so that they can get through this crisis in the most efficient way without losing control of either their fleet or all their employees or the security around their employees. But really around this long-term relationship, making sure that you are working with somebody who is also there tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, we have to close this panel discussion. I would like to thank you for your presence and your time. And I invite the audience to rate this session in our event app and to give your feedback. And also let us know who convinced you the most of our 4 top executives. Let's share our thoughts and connect. You can also see in the event app what's on our agenda for next week. So we have, again, an exciting week. Thanks again. It was a pleasure being your moderator. And I wish you all a safe and healthy global fleet journey. Bye-bye.